All right. Hello and welcome. This is Doyle Buehler with the Transformation Think Tank Live today. Today I'm with a couple of amazing guests from all over Australia and the UK as well, which I'm going to get into just a moment. But what we're going to be talking about today is GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, and correct me if I got that wrong. We're going to be talking a lot.
Well, you haven't been drinking loads of beer so far.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're going to be talking about that. I've got some questions coming up that I want to get into and get some answers on the business side of things. And how is it going to affect us? Because right now we're thinking, well, maybe it's just a UK thing, maybe it's and a European Union thing and that sort of thing. Actually, we have no idea what's going on over there. Let's be completely honest. So, Tim, you might have to straighten us out on that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
But yeah. But my name is Doyle Buehler. I'm the author of Breakthrough, a book on creating your digital business advantage through digital business transformation. Go to breakthrough.digital to get started on your journey. I want to talk about some of the issues facing businesses online. GDPR comes up a lot. We've probably seen this big ticking time bomb timer that has it ticking down to sometime in May, and we're going to go through that as well. I want to talk about how we can actually get ready for it if you haven't already considered it, if you are already sort of in the midst of it, what you need to prepare for, and then some tools and hopefully some ideas that you can actually use to work through it also. So if you're watching this in replay, just hashtag replay with your questions and we'll get answers to those as soon as you can. So should you be scared of GDPR? I don't think so. I've got Nathan Haig. He's a whiz programmer and all around nice guy, knows a lot of shit about business and marketing and programming and that sort of thing. So he's actually joining us from Melbourne today, and he's traveling around the world too. So it's glad that we could nail him down and get him on the program. I also have Timothy Hughes, like I said, from the UK, and he's written the best-selling author of Social Selling and is a complete digital marketing genius and listed by Brand24 as this number 70 top digital influencers in the world, which is pretty cool. And then I have Anne Wardell. She's a business and compliance lawyer from the Central Coast of Australia, and she's been a lawyer for over 30 years and working in many, many areas in the Victorian Bar. She's going to help us with some of the legal questions, which I'm sure there's going to be a few as we come into this. So welcome to the program, guys. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Yeah, cool. So Anne, you want to give us a quick rundown on your experience and how GDPR is kind of filling your inbox?
Okay, I've actually done quite a few webinars now on the GDPR because of the impact that it's likely to have on Australian businesses. At Compliance Quarter, we do a lot of work in the energy sector, retail energy sector, but we also do work with banks and other things. So with normally something happening in the European Union is not that interesting. Well, it's it's interesting in a general sense, but it's a long way away and most of us don't really care. So the reason that the GDPR is relevant, of course, is that for Australian businesses that have customers that are based in a European Union country, they will have to consider the GDPR and whether it complies. And basically, these days, with so many companies selling things online, you may or may not know where your customer is based. So I've been doing a lot of talking about how it will apply, will it apply, and what a lot of it aligns with the Privacy Act in Australia, but there are some significant differences.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks so much, Anne. We'll have some questions coming up for you. Nathan, give us a rundown of who is Nathan Haig. And what's he doing right now? What are you doing? Is that legal?
Teabagging. All right, so that's happening. All right. So I'm Nathan Haig from nathanhaig.com. And so basically I create software weapons for entrepreneurs. I'm what they call a full stack marketer. Not only do I go offline and online, but I also write the tools that other marketers use. And I drink tea.
So you're going to get the businesses into trouble if they don't comply. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of there's a lot of like misnomers around GDPR at the moment, and there's remember White, like planes will fall out of the sky, dogs will start shagging cats, and pear shaped. Yeah. A lot of that around GDPR, but I also think that it's actually quite easy. All right, a lot just cutting through, but there's a lot of like gotchas in there, and but it does apply to everybody that actually runs an email database. Well, but I only market to Australia. Yeah, but how do you know like someone from a database? I don't.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and that's one of the things is we're going to have to decide or get some ideas. Oh, we lost Nathan. He must have hit the off button. All right, Tim, you're the last guy there. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Leadership Associates. We provide social transformation to organizations. Also the author of the book, as you mentioned before, of Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. Based in London, GDPR is a big thing and is an opportunity for people. It shouldn't be seen as a threat. It certainly is going to help us individuals that are tired of being spammed and being, people just scraping data and just sending us rubbish that we're not interested in. So it's a great step forward. And I back up what Anne says. So and what Nathan said. So while it's European legislation, if you have employees in Europe, you have customers in Europe, anything, or you're marketing into Europe, then you have to comply.
Yeah, well, that actually starts off the discussion. But what defines that, though, is that they have to be physically, like, honestly, with e-commerce and whatnot. I mean, there's customers around the world. How do you define that up front? Like, do they have to tell you that, hey, I'm from EU, therefore you should be treating me differently?
I think there's a certain amount of common sense that we need to apply to GDPR, which is that we actually are now, as the internet grows up and we need to grow up with it, and the way that we need to treat data, our data, your mother's data, and we just need to be responsible for that. And if you're holding data on people, you need to be responsible and accountable for that data that you're holding. And you can't suddenly just push that off. I had an email sent to me recently and I said, you do realize that in a month you won't be GDPR compliant? And they said, yeah, but if this is not us, we're holding the data on MailChimp. It's like, no. If you hold the data, you're responsible and you're accountable for it, regardless of where you hold the data. And I think we just need to be mature about it.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So are there legal repercussions, Anne, for an Australian company?
Well,
or even for
the
US or
fines under the GDPR, the maximum fines can be 4% of turnover or 20 million euros. So as I've been saying to people, that's a sizable stick to hold over people. Interesting discussion I had today with my boss, Connor. Question is, if you set up a subsidiary company that will deal with GDPR type issues, you're Australian, but you transact in Europe, you set up a subsidiary company. If there's a breach, will it be limited to the subsidiary? My view is no, and I agree with you, Timothy. My view is that if the parent company or other companies in the group are getting the benefit of those transactions in Europe or those customers or using that information, then the liability will attach to the group. So my view is that you probably can't siphon it off and set up a purpose-built company to kind of protect yourself.
No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So the thing about GDPR is that actually it's not new legislation, really. There's a lot of legislation that's already in place, like the right to be forgotten, the General Data Protection Act actually already is here. The difference is that you don't really get fined very much. And the important thing, as Anne says, is that you actually get fined pretty hard. Now, for someone like there was a data breach at Think W3, which was a subsidiary of the travel company Thomas Cook. They were fined £180,000, which is 225,000 US dollars. Under GDPR, that would be a £287 million fine, which is $400 million. So if you're a subsidiary, it basically they take the top level.
But what do they actually use to assess a penalty? Like, is that per occasion? Is that like the size of the? Well, actually, you did say that, Anne. You said it's over turnover. But what about the that's a pretty big company. What about sort of the smaller, small business side of things? What should they be concerned about? Is there actually even going to be policing to say fine these businesses?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question because when they were drafting these regulations, there was concern in the European Union countries about their own regulatory systems and privacy. And so most people are waiting to see how that interaction of the GDPR and it then is monitored in the individual European Union country, and how that will all interact. Timothy, you might have a better idea, but it seems that it's going to be a bit complex between the various regulatory bodies.
So in the UK, even though we're exiting the European Union in 2 years' time, well, 12 months' time, we've actually agreed that what we're going to do is that we are keeping that GDPR. So the GDPR regulations will be UK regulations, and it is likely that we've actually got a bill going through Parliament that will make the regulations even tighter. And I think if we look at what's been happening with Facebook, I think most people will understand and agree that we need to be far more responsible and far more accountable with what we do with our data. To answer your question, Doyle, what they will do is the plan is that they will, if you have a data breach or if you complain, if for example, if someone contacts me, I have the right to remain forgotten. So the individuals in that company have to remove me from every single database. So from every single salesperson spreadsheet, from every single CRM across the whole of the business, they have to remove me. If they don't and they contact me again, what I can do is I can report them to their data protection officer, and they have to put in the report. And what the EU do is then look at that and they decide on the level of the fine based on how prepared you were. So if you weren't prepared, you will get fined. If you were prepared and you can actually prove that you would put a number of steps in place to show that you actually were complying to GDPR, you may actually not get as fined as much.
Okay. Yeah. But do you need to, is this just for commerce, or is this just for marketing, or is it both? Are they both integrated, or how does that actually work?
It's all personal data.
Okay. So commerce data, if they actually buy from you, so it's not as loose as saying if you're on my marketing list, you need to have that proper permission. Whereas if you're on my purchase from me,
every single company in Europe at the moment, I'm getting 2-3 emails every day, basically from companies that are saying you need to revalidate yourself on our list. Wetherspoons, the big pub company, completely deleted all of their email lists because they've been fined in the past. And as an organization, we're now GDPR compliant. And they also, and so for what we've done is that we've gone through all of our data. Luckily, we're a small business. And what we've done is that we've deleted every single bit of personal data or any data about any customers.
And that's been a bit of the battle in some. I did a presentation to a number of large financial institutions, and that's one of the challenges that they have with implementing GDPR compliant systems, is being able to isolate and identify an individual customer for the purposes of anonymizing them or removing their data. And that one of the institutions we spoke to said that one of their problems is even knowing where all that their personal data is. because they have so
Yeah.
much.
Yes.
And so that's really been the need for the lawyers to join up with our tech people, IT tech developers, designers, because it's that piece around making the system flexible enough that you can identify a single customer and their information. And not all systems are that compliant. The other important thing with the GDPR is that third-party contracts with service providers who collect and store the data, that contract has to contain a clause that says they're GDPR compliant as well. So there's lots of work, I think, for smart tech heads to help businesses with that, identifying things.
That, Nathan, that's where you kind of fit in. You're the programming tech head. What are you seeing in the sort of the business side? Are people scared of this? What are they looking for? What are you doing to kind of help them in that pathway?
All right. So the first thing to understand, right, is that this is going to affect, from a practical level, it's going to affect anyone at all right, that has an email database. All right. So first and foremost, let's give some solutions, because it's all like sounds like doom and gloom. Right. So let's cut through. And so here's some practical points that you can implement in your business if you're listening or watching to this. Right. So the first thing is you've got an email list. Okay, so it might be ActiveCampaign, it might be MailChimp, Aweber, it could be Infusionsoft, Ontraport, you get me, right? Any of those pieces of software, what you need to do is immediately, all right, is to create another list, all right, and call it GDPR compliant. You can call it whatever you want, call it Trevor if you want, but you need another list. What you then do is, in your program of choice, and create a series of emails, all right, because guaranteed the first one you send out won't get read by a lot of people, all right? Make sure you use emojis on the subject. That'll always get your read rate up. So first thing first, send out an email that basically says, do a bit of social engineering on it. Don't just go GDPR compliance, because guarantee you, like your list of 15,000 people, right, will go down to probably 600, all right? So make it a bit more amusing than just going GDPR compliance. Put GDPR in there, but have a bit of fun with the subject.
That brings up a question though. Do you have to specifically identify that as being GDPR compliant, or is that
I would.
Yeah, I would. I wouldn't hide behind anything. It all gets a bit boring and it all gets a bit markety and a bit stoic, right? So have a bit of fun with it, even if it's a corporate, right? Because I guarantee you, if you don't, your email list that you've carefully cultivated and spent a shitload of money on over the last couple of years will go down to a fraction of what it is, right? So we're talking about practical advice. Do that. You might want to play this back at half speed, all right, to catch up with every word that I'm saying, all right? But anyway, so get a list, all right, together. That's your compliant list. Send the email out, all right? Make sure that they land on a page which says, you know, these are our compliance statements. We'll talk about that one in a minute. All right. But essentially, if they do that, okay, it then opts them in. It moves them from one list, the current list that you've got, into the GDPR compliant list. Go ahead and do that. All right. So it's a double opt-in. All right. They're going to get sent an email because you're going to set it up that way. It's just a regular double opt-in email list, but they're already on my list. Yeah, do it again. All right. All right. The people that don't actually reply back to you, and they won't, all right, you've basically got until May the 25th to get them back on there, right? So create some follow-up sequences, get them on there is the point of the story. Inevitably, your mail lists are going to go down and plummet in their numbers. I'm not going to lie, it just happens, all right? So that's that, all right? Write compelling, emails for a start. Anyway, so that's the first thing. That's a fix that you can do right now after listening to this. You can go and do that. Create your list, send out an email, get them to double opt-in, move them from the current list onto the GDPR list. Job done on that one. Here's another thing, all right? You all have pixels, all right, on your sites, right? So you might be running a blog. You might be running
Nathan, just a quick question. Should we burn then anybody that doesn't rejoin onto the new GDPR list, or what?
That's
burn
exactly
the list,
what
not the person, of course.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's what we do here in Australia. But anyway, burn then anyone that basically doesn't come over May the 25th, like you've lost them. Okay, you can't use those. The other big thing, right, a practical thing that you can do immediately, is everyone bangs on about PII, so personally identifiable information, right? It's called PII. So what that means is that no one really knows at the moment, no one can give a straight answer, all right, on Google Analytics. They're like, well, I run Google Analytics. Great. All right. Well, that's not PII, is it? Well, no, it's not. But if you then start connecting your Google Analytics into your MailChimp or your ActiveCampaign, you hook it into your Shopify, you start becoming like the ability to then start tracking individual users and individual user bases. So it can be argued, all right, and this is why like company or corporates are like tying themselves up in knots at the moment, about stuff like Google Analytics. Now, the easiest thing that you can do on this, all right, is not listen to Facebook and not listen to Twitter, because they've just moved the 1.5 billion contacts right out of Europe, out of the Irish jurisdiction. They've moved it back over to their American servers, right? So what happens is Facebook might be GDPR compliant. You opted in, you knew you were being served adverts, and that's your lot, right? However, all right, even though Facebook is GDPR compliant, your website that's hosting the Facebook pixel isn't. You have to ask the permission explicitly for every pixel, right, that you're firing on your site. Now, I'm talking about Google Analytics, stuff like Hotjar, stuff like Facebook Pixel. Maybe you've got an AdWords retargeting pixel. Everything, right? So most people will have like a nice selection of those. A lot of people might just have their Google Analytics on there. But what you need to do is you need to have some form, if you weren't running WordPress, for example, a lot of people are, go and have a look for some GDPR-like compliance plugins. Now, they're all a bit crap at the moment, I'm not going to lie, right? Because what they do is they seek the permission for you to explicitly turn on the pixels, all right? So the pixels include things like... well, we'll list them, all right? So I've grouped them as a programmer, as a developer. I've grouped them into this one. So we have essential website cookies. Now, essential stuff could be if you're running, let's say, a membership website, all right, where you have to log in. Well, that's an essential part of the website. Like, if you don't turn that on, all right, you don't get into my software backend, all right, my membership site. So that could be turned on. That's no worries, all right, because that's like critical. But when it comes to like to performance and functionality, well, now we start talking about stuff like caching, okay? So that's optional. So they have to turn that on. Everything on your website has to be turned off by default. It's called privacy by default. So if you have your Facebook pixel firing right now, as soon as someone comes to your website, they have to explicitly turn on that Facebook pixel. Okay? Yeah, but Facebook's GDPR compliant. Facebook is, you aren't. You have to see... Right?
Yeah. But do we have the technology to actually do that, though?
Well, it's funny you should say that, son, because I'm just developing some right now, all right, to make it easy. Must. Right, if you're going to be doing this, can I make a massive suggestion, right? Because it will be an admin pain in the arse to start off with, whether my software comes out in time or not. But definitely do this. Go to tagmanager.google.com. Tagmanager.google.com. And what you want to do is you want to put all of your pixels in Google Tag Manager. It's kind of like one pixel, like it's a Braveheart, you know, no, it's not Highlander, isn't it, of like pixels. It's like one pixel to rule them all. So you basically have Google Tag Manager. Think of it as a bit bucket. You basically run Google Tag Manager, all right, and in Tag Manager, you have a little pixel, you copy and paste that and put it on your website. There you go. And all of your other pixels take off your website and put them into Google Tag Manager. Okay, that's going to be the thing that like trips a lot of people up, and it's quite a technical thing. So you really should be in touch with me on that. But have a look on Google, have a look on YouTube. If you do that, whatever happens next, we can then set permissions. All right, we're not going to go too technical, but basically, if they're in Tag Manager, we can fairly easily, right, then when someone comes to your site, everything's turned off by default, and it goes, hey, I want to track you for marketing purposes. Like anyone's going to turn that on. But at least you can then say, okay, well, if they choose on, I can find me Facebook and me AdWords and me Twitter and me Quora and me Reddit. You know what I mean? All right. So if you have them in Tag Manager, that should be something that you do immediately. So there's two things that you can do. Triggering it, all right, well, that's a solution out there that I'm working on right now. But you should get all of your pixels into Tag Manager right now, okay, because that'll make it easier for whatever you choose next to do. All right?
Right. The brutal reality is, though, is that nobody's going to do that, right? Let's be completely honest, or a very, very small percentage. I don't know. And Tim, what do you think? How are we going to get around this?
I'm not sure that we're trying to get around anything, aren't we?
not get around, but how to implement this then.
We all embrace the fact that we don't, that it's important to be responsible with our own data and our mother's data,
yes.
stuff like that. And we wouldn't want, I certainly wouldn't want my mother's bank account details put on the internet for everybody to use. So why wouldn't we not be responsible and embrace this?
But isn't there a difference though between your bank account and your credit card details? And if you visited a site and have a pixel fired for you for remarketing and retargeting, isn't there a difference or not?
I don't want any of that stuff. You know, none of us want any of that stuff. So, you know, this is a great way to actually have a clear out and actually stop having all this stuff put in front of us that we don't want.
Yeah, but you say that, right? But that's going to be a pain in the arse, because what's going to happen is, right, a knock-on effect of this, right, will be that businesses can't fire their Facebook pixel. So here's a scenario for you, a very real scenario that's going to play out. Watch. So May the 25th comes, basically nothing happens. Y2K all over again, right? Well, Germany's got a hard-on for Facebook, right? Way before like this whole like Cambridge Analytica scandal. So what'll happen is, right, no one will like do anything about GDPR. Some Fortune 50 companies I know haven't even got their shit together right now. All right, I know because I work with them. So this is what's going to happen. May the 25th comes, right? No one's got their GDPR shit together. And so what'll happen is a high-value scalp will be claimed, right, and held up, right, in front of all of the corporate world. And I'm betting, bottom dollar, that Germany will hold up Facebook's, right, scalp in some way, shape, or form. It'll either be Facebook or it'll be like Google. It'll be one of those two. And at that point, everyone then will go, shit, yeah, we gonna like put that on the back burner. It's going to go onto the front burner now. Okay, so all the corporates and enterprise and all smaller companies are going to go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I can see that as an important thing. So what's going to happen, right?
So it's an important thing then, Nathan.
No, it's an important thing. Let me finish. I'm giving you the scenario, right? So come May the 25th, all right, at the moment you have like this beautiful run, all right, of like maybe the 5 to 7 years, I think it's been, right, where we can then say, right, we can increasingly better target as businesses our adverts, okay, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing at the moment, all right, but you can target your adverts. So what will happen is businesses are like, well, okay, fair enough. We can better target our adverts to people that want our stuff. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? That's not the point. But as far as a business owner goes that's listening to this and watching this, it's going to be a pain in the arse, because as more and more people opt out.
Maybe what we should be doing is rather than actually looking at things like advertising, is actually looking at things that are better, that people actually want and actually people want to engage with, rather than social rather than things like advertising.
You're not listening, right? Because once that like targeting goes window, right? How is a business, if the data from Facebook and Google is getting more cloudy and more sort of like there, all right, and more fuzzy because more and more people are opting out, businesses will be like, right, well, I'm supposed to be like throwing some money and pissing money into the wind on an ad budget on a more cloudy, milky, like not really targeted audience. And here's the thing as well, as a business owner, okay, I'll throw another $1,000 a day on my advert. But now no one's like doing their conversion pixels because obviously no one opted into that. So I, as a business owner, won't even know that conversions have been taking happen. How will I know how much it's cost me to get my sale?
Nathan, I don't do it. Nathan, I don't use advertising. I don't have to use advertising.
That's fine.
We're a social organization. We don't use advertising. So anything, anything to do with pixels or anything to do with advertising or putting products that nobody wants to buy in front of people, that to interrupt them, we don't do that because we don't have to.
And that's admirable. But most businesses and most business owners do want to be able to do that. All right. So you saying off the cuff, we don't do that. Well, that's correct. But most businesses are in the business of selling things.
Yeah, because we're in the process of selling things, and we don't use adverts as a way of basically getting people to buy things. You don't have to do that anymore. We go to where our customers are, which is social media, and what we do is that we interact with them, we build relationships with them, and that's how we sell. We don't use adverts. We don't need to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But there's 99 businesses that don't do that right now.
It's over, Nathan. Advertising is over. People don't want it. And this is what this is about. This is about talking to people how they want to be talked to, how buyers want to be talked to. And that's it. All right. It's over.
That's advertising. But now as a programmer, I want to give you a better app. If you've opted out of all of my tracking and my user tracking, how will it
Well, Nathan, I don't know, because I don't look at ads. I live my life in an ad-free world. I don't. Nobody looks at ads. We don't look at billboards. We don't look at bus ads. We don't. We switch the channel if an ad comes on the radio. Nobody looks at ads anymore.
There we go. Put ads to one side. We're not talking about that, mate. We're talking about now those apps that you use to do your job. I can't now track what buttons you click, how often that you click it, what screens you bring up. I can't track.
That's GDPR. We need to be accountable, and we need to be responsible with people's data.
So from the perspective of running ads, I see the difference here, Tim and Nathan, is that if you're running ads, then yes, you need to be concerned about that. Timothy, you're coming from the aspect that, hey, guess what? If you're doing it a little bit differently, you don't need ads, so it doesn't. It's really irrelevant to you.
No.
Yeah. So we're not talking about ads at this point. We're talking about user tracking for all the apps that you do use in your.
Yeah. Okay. No. Well, that's a good point, though, Nate. And what do you think here? Like, is there what's next? Like, what should businesses be worried about or concerned about, or should they be?
Well, businesses should be compliant, and I guess I agree with Timothy in relation to it's important that we protect our personal information. But I also understand where Nathan's coming from in relation to the apps and the use that you can put to apps to get some insight in relation to your customers' behaviours and things. I know from my own personal experience that a number of the major financial institutions are definitely setting themselves up to be GDPR compliant and have been working on it for a couple of years. I think that people are taking it seriously. The other thing is that in Australia, we recently had a new scheme introduced in February called the Notifiable Data Breach Scheme, which is another scheme relating to personal information and what's done with it. In the first quarter report, there were 63 breaches in 5 weeks. And under the Notifiable Data Breach Scheme, if you breach the information, you then have to notify all the customers that were impacted. So it comes back to this ability of your data systems being able to isolate and identify customers. But it is, and Australia, the Productivity Commission has also is looking at introducing other legislation which is much like the GDPR, which gives the consumer rights in relation to their personal information, rather than the rights being with the business to do what they want to with it.
Okay. And so where does that leave us, though? Like, what should businesses be doing now to prepare for that?
If they haven't already started, they're in trouble, in my personal view, because they should have already been doing it. And I'm not a tech head, but it seems to me there is quite a bit of complexity around having systems be compliant with this ability to isolate and identify an individual customer. There are various legal documents that will need to be reviewed and changed. Third-party vendor contracts will need to be reviewed. The other thing we haven't talked about yet is appointing a data protection officer. Under the GDPR, certain businesses will have to appoint someone called a data protection officer. And it will be interesting to see how that works out, because basically the person needs to understand the back end, the tech side, but also needs to have a good understanding of all the regulations, laws and policies that apply. So it will be interesting to see what people get the data protection officer roles and how that develops.
Is that, and again though, is that a Fortune 500 requirement, or is that like every single business that does?
It's a requirement under the GDPR, depending on the type of business that you're doing. Certain companies will need it and certain won't, but for the ones that do, that's going to be an added cost for them in relation to protecting privacy.
So we have a data protection officer, Doyle. So we have 12 people in our company, and I appointed it, and as CEO, I appointed a DPO. The reason for that is what we needed to have was one single person in the company that takes responsibility for GDPR and actually has an understanding of what's going across the whole of the organization. And they're also the person that are appointed. So if you actually get hit by either a request or you get hit by a, your data is compromised, then that would be the person that takes responsibility for putting in the report into the EU.
Yeah, they're the liaison, really.
Yeah. So for me, they're like the lightning conductor person taking. And while I see data as basically being a board issue, all of our people on our board take responsibility for it. It's the data protection officer that has the responsibility that I can turn to say, is this the right person, or is this the right thing that we should be doing to our organization?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Ian's been just amazingly bountiful with all his questions and comments and statements here. Thank you so much, Ian. The last one, needing a DPO, data protection officer, is down to the amount of data processed that can be outsourced, and in some cases to an external shared DPO. Are we just adding?
About, if you process data on a large scale. So basically all the financial institutions, from my recollection, what is a large scale is not defined. So what is large?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But my question is the what's the word? The authentication of this going to be based on people reporting it, or are they actually going to go out and seek? Nathan, you called, they're probably going to pull somebody onto the table like Google or Facebook and say, hey, what the heck are you doing here? Do you think it's going to be an example like that? Or are they actively searching for possible compliance issues with companies? And are they going to be starting with the Fortune 1000 type businesses, or are they just going to wait for people to report this?
You're looking for a scalp to claim, right? So it'll be like the Fortune 50 companies, like straight away, and their subsidiaries. That will happen, right? As far as the smaller guys go, then it'll be like as and when you've got like a reasonable time to get back to any data requests. So let's say 30 days. You know what pricks like me would do though? Like I would write a bot and I would flood my competitor with like privacy requests. All right. So if you've got a data privacy officer, what you need to also do is understand that there's going to be a lot of spam requests as well. So how will you get around that? So the data has to be given to them in a friendly form. All right. Yeah. So it's not like a data dump, right, and then just give it to someone. So you'll need to be able to have that data privacy officer basically go, look, we've got you in our Facebook marketing audience. We have you in our MailChimp or Active Campaign audience. We have you in our CRM. Okay, so if you're running like a CRM, like Agile or whatever, all of those tools at the moment are coming up with their own like GDPR export features. Right? So familiarize yourself with them. Like if you're running the CRM software, do that. If you're running Google Analytics, you're pretty much covered, all right? But you still need to get their permission to to fire off the pixels. So that data privacy officer, all right, as you correctly identified, just needs to be across like all of the avenues and the vectors where PII could possibly lurk, right? So if it's an email list that if you're a relatively straightforward small business that's got like an e-commerce website hooked into MailChimp, then it's going to be pretty easy for you, all right? So fairly easy. So I wouldn't stress too much about it. Like when the requests come in, just have some systems or procedures, or like get your virtual assistant to be able to follow those policies and procedures. All right, so you don't have to sit there and tie yourself up in knots, because me would then sort of like flood competitors on like a bigger level to basically flood them with GDPR requests. All right, so no one's really talked about that one. You can spam an awful lot of people, right? But a lot of people out of business their departments up in knots. All right, I wouldn't do that. All right, but that's an example of what you could do. All right, so yeah.
Okay. So is this Y2K all over again, Tim?
Well, yeah.
Question from Alexander.
I agree with Nathan. I think what's going to happen is that what people will do, as they do usually with legislation, is they put things off. And what somebody will do is that they will pick up a scalp, and then everybody will wake up to it. I think the difference here with Y2K, I mean, obviously people spend a lot of time and effort making sure that it didn't happen. You know, there's a lot of money spent. Where at the moment, I don't think people are actually accessing and are implementing the systems and are taking it seriously. But it will happen, and I think that certainly over the next 12 months we'll see a shift, and see a shift in the way that we have to sell and the way that we market.
Yeah, and kind of moving, perhaps that this is sort of that that inflection point, Tim, that you were talking about earlier, is that, look, if you're doing it correct, and I want to have you on some other shows as well, because we'll talk sort of more of that. But, you know, this is one of those inflection points where, guess what? There are sort of alternative ways of doing that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So do you think there's going to be some, here, got a question from Ricky. Do you think this is going to bring more black hat tactics until everybody can sort of understand what needs to be done? And what do you think? Avoid the law.
Yeah, well, I agree that they will go for a big scalp. They've got a big stick, big penalties. And it really is the only way that people take notice. In Australia a few years ago, they introduced a whole new system called the Personal Property Securities Act, which changed the way we looked at securities for goods. And I spent a couple of years going around talking about that, and nobody gave a toss. And then the first case came through.
Not that, all right?
What?
Sorry, Nathan.
You're swearing. You're swearing, Anne.
Oh, sorry. And then a company lost a couple of $1 million equipment, earth-moving equipment, and everybody went, "Oh my God, we've got to be compliant." So it's only when something happens in the back pocket, the dollars, that everyone else will go, "Oh my God, we better take notice."
We're talking to a lot of corporates at the moment, and they are really, really concerned about this. One of them actually said that they feel that we're actually in a situation where all they can do actually get their salespeople to sit in the office and hope the phone will ring, because they're just so scared about what's going to happen in terms of the use of the data, and how someone is actually going to complain. And because they're a large organization, they get hit with a big fine. And nobody wants to be the CEO who's on watch when they get a big fine.
Yeah, and the other thing it's going to impact is mailing lists. Because Nathan's already talked about your own mailing list, but, you know, the trade in buying a mailing list, you will need to know that that mailing list has been created in a GDPR compliant manner, which involves consent, and then have they consented to that list then being used in another way.
Yeah, well, that will be fine. Like, the only thing that's going to affect, right, is when you create custom audiences. I mean, you can go on like the darknet now, like 25 cents a record, go and find all the black people, right, in, let's say, New York, right, something that you couldn't ordinarily get. There's been a load of data breaches, so just get that, right, download the list, upload it into Facebook custom audience, tick the box which says, yeah, of course it was GDPR compliant, and then sell them diabetes kits. That's something you can do right now, and that's not going to change, right? Because, like, how are you going to, like, police that? Is Facebook going to be like, well, it's going to be an honour system? They'll basically say, like, there's repercussions if we find out, all right, but how are they going to find out? So a lot of people are going to be like, yeah, most people just get their, like, email lists, right, download them, upload it into the custom audiences and run it like as if nothing happened. All right, but you know, it's not going to be the
that's from the ads. That's from the potential ad side, though, Nathan. Though, but what about like email marketing and that sort of thing? Is that going to kill that whole industry of third party lists? I mean, they're horrible as it is, and I don't know who would actually use them at this point.
Criminal background checks. You're not allowed to like do like hold any criminal data on anybody now without their express permission. So data providers, list providers, like criminal reference checks, like credit history checks, yeah, that's going to be interesting. So no one's really got like, I'd be short in those stocks right now, put it that way.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We got another comment here from Ricky. Here's a scenario: just like you can ring fence taxes a la Starbucks, countries will outsource to non-jurisdictional countries and base those data collection services where the data is not even more at risk. So basically,
that doesn't work.
No,
because as we talked about earlier on, the fine is against the holding company, not the smaller company.
And it's not just about where the data is stored. That's another piece of it, where you've got controllers and processors and things. It's about the use. So even if you store your data offshore, if you use it and you have customers in the European Union, then you are the one that needs to be compliant. So maybe your processing will be compliant, but you may be breaching in the use space.
Okay.
So my view is that won't be a sufficient protection.
Okay.
So the days of being able to be fast and loose with people's data is over. And we now have to be responsible and accountable for the data that we hold. And if you're not, then you need to delete it.
And given that we're basing this all on the European Union, though, right? So again, let's go back a step. Just because it's there, does that mean that American, Canadian, companies, Australian companies, Asian companies, why should they say, yeah, we really need to be part of this? And not just go, well, it's not really us.
Because it's about where your customer is, and it's because.
But on that note, does the GDPR board have jurisdiction to fine a company that, say, is in Australia or is in the United States?
I'm pretty sure Australia has signed up. There's a treaty, I think, and Australia has signed up. And it's about the customer, because I agree with Timothy. The way we have to think about personal information and data is it belongs to the person. So it's about where that person resides, what laws apply where that person resides, not what law applies where the company that uses it is, because it's the person's information and their rights. As I said earlier, how it's all going to work with these different countries' regulatory bodies, I don't know. It will be very interesting to see how that mix will work.
Okay, yeah, and we got a comment here from Ian. Ann's correct. A USA vendor processing UK citizen data, for example, has to comply with GDPR, or both processor in USA and controller in UK are in breach of GDPR laws. Okay.
So the Sarbanes-Oxley law, which is now implemented globally, that's a US law. And the US, when they implemented Sarbanes-Oxley, said, if you want to deal with us and you want to have financial services transactions in the US, you have to comply. And therefore, Sarbanes-Oxley was something that was implemented across the whole world.
Because of that. Yeah, exactly.
And, I guess if you're talking about ring fencing or barrier or something like that, what we've been discussing with some companies that we've been talking to, depending on what they sell and how they sell it, is if they make their website just for Australians, then they don't have European Union customers. And they don't then have to be concerned so much. But, it then limits your customer base. But that, I guess, is one way where you say, my customers are only Australian.
Yeah, so you could choose to say, I'm only going to serve Australian customers or American customers or Canadian customers, and then that's it. End of story. But that's not to say that these countries will probably implement something very similar as well. I mean, I know a lot of them already have that Australia has it, Canada has it. You know, some privacy regulations, so they could probably expand it a little bit as well. Welcome back, Nate. We're just actually going to close off. I just kind of wanted to get some final thoughts. Tim, let's start with you. What do you think businesses should do first? What should they be concerned about? How should they go about things going forward?
So what Nathan said earlier on in terms of getting all of your data, you need to get it GDPR compliant, and you need to get people to basically opt in. Yeah. And go through the process as Nathan outlined. And you know, if you're holding data, why are you holding data? You don't have to. If you're holding data, you have to be responsible and you have to be accountable. Otherwise, delete it.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Thanks. And Anne, what about you? What are your sort of closing comments on what we should do?
Well, information is power. And if you know about the GDPR and you know what you need to do, then you're halfway there.
Okay, perfect. And then Nathan, what about you? You said best group on GDPR ever. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just put a couple of resources in the chat. There's two things that you need. One, there's a GDPR, it was written by Michael Buckaby, who's in the onlinegeniuses.com. Very, very knowledgeable guy. So have a look at that. That's a free resource for real normal people that can talk proper and good. The second one is, and you can have that one free. The second one is there's a GDPR for online entrepreneurs. All right, there's a group for that, a dedicated group. And at this moment in time, there's around about 18,000, almost 19,000 people as a member of that group, run by a chick called Suzanne Dibble. All right, so
okay, cool. Lost you again there, but yeah, I've seen Suzanne's work, and maybe I'll have her.
You've skipped to the right on the replay. Just get yourself your list, your email program, all right, of choice. Make another list of GDPR compliant. Send out a load of emails, right, that basically move them from that list into your GDPR list. Secondly, run Google Tag Manager. Stick all your pixels into Google Tag Manager. One pixel to rule them all. And lastly, just remember what GDPR actually is. Right? Just go, why are you using the data? What data are you getting from? Ask yourself, right, like old Timo, right? What is the information that you want on them? Why are you getting it? How long do you need the data for? How will they get the data off? And how will they get the data between you and somebody else? Because it is something as well. I don't want you to look after my data. I'd like to go to that guy over there to make sure you have the ability to export their data, give it to them so they can take it elsewhere as well. So really, just, like old Timo says, right, what do you need the data for? All right, be things do you actually need. A lot of the times you don't. So, yeah. Over now.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it. All right, cool. And just if you guys want to get in touch with Nathan, you can go to wowq.io as well as nathanhaig.com. You can go to, if you want to get in touch with Anne, you can talk to her at compliancequarter.com.au. And if you want to talk with Tim, you can go there, socialexperts.net. Is that the best URL, Tim, or did you have another one?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent. And so thank you so much for all your time for the panel and all the amazing questions and comments. And I wasn't able to actually show them all because we had so many going on here, but really appreciate your time. If you'd like to start on your journey of digital transformation, go to breakthrough.digital. Thanks again to all the guests. And again, if you're watching this in replay, just hashtag replay. And for everybody else, we will see you online. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.